Hi there, you're here with me to delve into a vital GMAT topic of group work under rates. I'm your GMAT Quant mentor Devmitra, here to equip you with the analytical tools necessary for mastering this key area on the GMAT. So I'm going to take you through 5 steps to explain the concept of group work. But before we move across these 5 steps, let's understand that on the GMAT, whenever you get a question with multiple men, multiple machines, multiple pipes or multiple taps, but all of them doing the same amount of work in unit time, it's an indication that the GMAT question is around group work. Let's move to the first point now. The amount of work that you do is always equal to the amount of work that you do every unit time, every hour, every minute, every second, multiplied with the total time for which you've worked, in terms of number of hours, number of minutes, number of seconds, even number of days. So total work is always a product of the rate of doing the work and the time for which the work has been done. So there are several quantities involved when we are dealing with a group work question on the GMAT. These quantities are men, days, hours or the amount of time they put in every day, and the total amount of work, represented by the variables M, D, H and W. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the quantities, say for example men, and I'm going to find the proportion of men with other quantities, keeping every other quantity constant. So say for example, in point number 2, men and days, what we do is we keep the number of hours and the total work constant. Think about it. If you have 10 men being able to complete a certain work in 20 days, what happens or what would happen if I increase from 10 to 20 in terms of the number of men? Do you think they would take again 20 days, or would the number of days increase now, given that the total work is constant, number of hours worked per day is constant? Not really, right? The number of days now is going to decrease to 10 days. Instead of 20 days, you will take half the number of days because you've increased the number of men. So in other words, men and days exhibit an inverse relationship with each other, given W and H are constant. So I can represent this as M1 D1 has to be equal to M2 D2. Similarly, if we have men and time as two variables, I'm trying to figure out the relationship of the variable M, the quantity M, with the quantity time represented by the variable, keeping the other two variables, which is D and W, constant. So say there were 10 men who were able to complete a certain W amount of work, working for 10 hours per day. Now instead of 10 men, we increase the number of men to 20 men. They still have the same amount of work to be completed, working for D number of days. What happens to the number of hours per day now? It's going to reduce. It's going to decrease to 5 hours per day. So basically, men and time also exhibit an inverse relationship with each other, given D and W being constant. So if the work is constant, number of days are constant, M1 H1 will be equal to M2 H2. And finally, if you think about men and work, say 10 men are able to complete 1 unit of work. But we have also kept the other two variables constant, which is H and D constant. Now instead of 10 men, if we increase the men to 20, so we have just doubled the number of men. Given that the number of hours they work per day, the number of days are also constant, the total work is going to increase and be doubled. Now would be 2 units of work. So men and work exhibit a direct relationship with each other. If you increase the number of men, given H and D are constant, the amount of work they do will be increased. If you decrease the number of men, the amount of work they do would decrease. So if I have to pick up a relationship, M1 by W1 has to be equal to M2 by W2. Clubbing all these relationships together, this and this, what we have with us is the universal foundational approach or concept to group work. M1 D1 H1 by W1 is M2 D2 H2 by W2. M, D and H represent men, days, number of hours. W1 and W2 represent the amount of work. So on a GMAT question of group work, first identify, is it a question of group work? Once you've identified that, figure out the values of the variables given, find out which quantity has been not given. Also understand what exactly is the value of work. try to rework on this formula or the concept based on the context of the GMAT question. For example, if you have a GMAT question where the quantities M, D, H are varying, but these two groups of people are doing the same amount of work, then we can rework on this entire formula and have M1, D1, H1 has to be equal to M2, D2, H2. So based on the quantities given, rework on the concept. Let's pick up a question to understand this better. Here's a question. Pause the video, play when you have thought through it. Alright, here on this question, you find it's a question with multiple workers. And it's also a question where the work is of packing boxes. The value of work is 360 and 540 respectively. On the GMAT, do you think even before you start solving it, can you eliminate a few answer choices in order to reduce the probability of you making any errors? Let's look into it. The number of workers has increased from 18 to 24. Whereas the amount of work has increased from 360 boxes to packing 540 boxes. So the increase in the number of workers is almost 33.33%. Whereas in that comparison, I see the number of boxes has increased or the amount of work has increased by 50%. So although your work has increased by 50%, the total number of workers have only increased by 33.33%. So the overall time has to be greater than 24 days. Answer option A and B thus can be eliminated. Now if you had time and you want to use the concept, M1 is equal to 18. When I say you had time, assuming at least you have 1 minute to operate. Guessing on the GMAT also is a fantastic strategy. You need not solve all the GMAT questions correctly. So make sure that you pick up the right questions and ensure that you get some of the advanced questions right, but all easy medium questions right. Coming to this. So I put in all the data here. Utilizing the data, 18 multiplied with 24 by 360 has to be equal to 24 multiplied with D2 upon 540. This stems from the fact that we are just using the concept M1 D1 by W1 is M2 D2 by W2. What I have done here is I have not utilized H1 and H2 because in this question, the number of hours they work every day has to be assumed to be equal. H1 is equal to H2. There is no mention of that. So 18 into 24 by 360 is this. You can factor it out. 18 times 2, 24 gets factored out. 2 times 27. D2 has to be equal to 27 days. So the answer we're looking for is answer option C, 27. This is how GMAT can test you on an easy level of a question or a early medium level of a question. Let's move on to one more question where you can utilize whatever you've learned so far. Pause the video, solve it, come back when you're ready. Alright, in this question, let's first identify the work. The work is printing pages. How many pages? 144 study guides multiplied with 10 pages gives you 1440 pages, which has to be the total amount of work. The rate of working is 1 page in 15 seconds. So since the printer can print 1 page in every 15 seconds, I know for a fact that in 60 seconds, which is 4 times 15, the printer can print 4 pages. And 60 seconds is equal to 1 minute. Similarly, moving ahead, in 60 minutes, the printer can print 4 times 60 or 240 pages. 60 minutes is 1 hour. In other words, the rate of working for this printer is 240 pages per hour. I converted this in hour because my final question is in hours. How many hours will it take to print all the study guides? So on the GMAT, always be careful about the units that you need to convert it into. Alright, coming back to it. We know that work is a product of rate and time. The rate here is 240. The work here is 1440. So time has to be a ratio between work and rate, which is equal to 1440 upon 240 or 6. 6 hours is the time that we have to look for. If you would like to utilize the alternate approach of M1, M2, D1, D2, please utilize after recognizing what are the values of the variables here. Like in this case, the amount of work here is either 1 or it's equal to 1440. Number of machines are constant. Number of machines is 1 in each case. So we can clearly eliminate that, rework on the formula because M1 is equal to M2. We would have H1 by W1 has to be equal to H2 by W2. Remember, the amount of time the first scenario takes in is 15 seconds and I can convert that into hours for quick calculations. So H1 here has to be 15 upon 3600 hours. No need to cancel at the stage, we can cancel it at the end. Utilizing the values, 15 by 3600 divided by W1, which is equal to 1, is equal to H2, which we don't know, upon W2, which is 1440. Now solving for H2, we have H2 is equal to 15 upon 3600 multiplied with 1440. Factor out the zeros, 12 times 12, 12 times 30, 3 times 4, 3 times 10, 15 times 4 is 60, 60 upon 10 is 6 hours. So answer option D here, using the approach which we learned right now on group work, will also be correct way of looking at the GMAT question. So this is how you treat GMAT questions on group work. Let's have a look at what all we have done in terms of concept, approaches and strategy. The concept we have to utilize for group work is this. Always identify which quantities are constant or equal, and we can rework on the formula according to that. Once you identify the values the quantities connect to, you can place in the values and figure out the value of the unknown. That is the core concept of group work. Once you have identified the question being a group work question, the GMAT question then can be solved very quickly by utilizing the concept. But remember, after identifying the problem to be a group work question and identifying each variable, what you need to do is you have to move in a very step-by-step methodical approach. And at the end or the final step is where you equate and solve questions. Make sure that irrespective of whichever rate question it is, try eliminating the answer choices to take smarter guesses or to recognize the correct answer in lesser amount of time. In fact, like I mentioned, guessing is also a strategy. Alright, so this is about the concept, approach and strategy on the GMAT area of group work. In this video, we have touched based on group work concept and approach. Going ahead, you're going to practice some application questions on the topic of group work. Alright, so go ahead, practice the application questions, move on and understand some official questions also to enhance this understanding. Stay curious, keep learning, ensure that you are thinking through as you start learning on each question and improve on your thought process. Till then, I'll sign off and I'll meet you in one more new video.